Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find the most podcasting apps. This is a weekly program where we come onto your radio dial and we tell y'all what is really going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally calling out the establishment on its BS and taking a fine telescope and analyzing the mainstream corporate media. The following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Well, it's a very auspicious week, everybody. We're going to be kind of starting today talking about a week from today. The municipal elections are happening, and that's always a big deal here on the show. We always try to make y'all aware of who's running, what they're all about, what is really kind of at stake in the particular election. And we're going to be going through that momentarily here. I did want to just encourage people, turnout in off-year municipal elections is typically extremely low. And I do want to encourage everybody. I know we do speak a lot on our show. There's a certain, I think, warranted cynicism on here. We're a very overtly anti-capitalist program. We always talk about the dictatorship of capital, but we do, I really do believe in a very sincere way that we do still are still able to exercise that kind of small d democracy in our backyard. And it is really important for all of us to exercise that because the local politician that you have up there on the dais often can affect your everyday life in ways more pronounced necessarily than what happens at the federal level. Now, granted, there's a lot going on at the federal level that's affecting the working class. There is, of course, the big EBT slash food stamp Armageddon that is going on that we are going to be talking about later on in the show. But oftentimes it is the case where we just, things happen at the federal level. We pay all of our attention, 100% of our attention is focused on that. We don't, you quiz a lot of people. Many of them would not be able to tell you who their city commission or city councilman, councilwoman are. And it is very important for us to stay engaged in those small municipal politics because if you don't, it can impact your life in some very immediate ways. So another story we're going to talk about later on the show is about this small town in Michigan who one of their council people it got turned is married to a genuine neo-Nazi, and there's been a bunch of political fallout from that. We're going to talk about that, but yeah, again, it kind of underscores the importance of paying attention to who is active politically where you live. So we're gonna be kind of coming out the gate talking about this particular election that's going on here in Kalamazoo, and unfortunately, I did want to interview. Our goal is always to interview all the candidates so that we can give you a really thorough view of who is running, what they're running on, what the stakes are, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, we were only able to, at the end of the day, coordinate just one single interview. We have an interview with Chris Glasser, who's running for mayor. You can find that on our online, on our YouTube, and Media Cyphers podcast. Unfortunately, we weren't able to set up interviews with other candidates for transparency's sake. Jacqueline Slobby reached out to us to set up an interview. Unfortunately, it was a little too late in the day. I wasn't able to confirm that. It was an episode right at the end of September slash early October. We did try to reschedule, but Jacqueline was unable to get back to us. We also had planned on interviewing another mayoral candidate. We reached out to um, excuse me, Robert Gray, who you may have seen around campus. He's doing a very like DIY campaign, just waving signs around, talking to people, really like kind of laser focused on gun violence. We were going to set up an interview with them, and then we sent them the questions. We did not hear back. So we did our due diligence. We tried to reach out to everybody, and unfortunately, we were not able to set up those candidate interviews like we usually like to do. Um, and full transparency, I did not reach out to David Anderson. Um, he has not, he's kind of bailed in the past. And also, I mean, I haven't really been shy. Whatever you think of David Anderson as a person, he really is kind of an avatar of Kalamazoo's status quo. He's very much on team Foundation for Excellence, team Southwest Michigan First. And, being that we are an explicitly left working class, program, I wasn't sure what really would be gained from giving David a platform. And of course, David Anderson has been given a platform in many different candidate forums, and press interviews in this election cycle and over the years. And of course, you are free to read those for yourself and make your own judgments. And we are going to link to some of those in the show notes. But I guess what we are left with then is, maybe, me as a humble little commentator giving you my thoughts on the upcoming election. And I will say it is genuinely a lot more exciting than the last one. The last election cycle, I really didn't see too many candidates that really impressed me a lot. I think Stephanie Hoffman, who's currently serving on the commission, was the last candidate that I thought was really like, you know, yeah, I guess the word would be exciting. They've been doing some decent work up at City Commission. I always agitate for people kind of do more, but there's somebody who's based in the community and rhetorically and in action looks out for the working class bottom line in a lot of ways. Um, in this election, we do have a lot, again, as I said, a very robust election cycle. There were a lot of people running, over half a dozen candidates running for positions for city commission. Chris Glasser, and to my mind, has been running a very vibrant campaign for mayor, insurgent campaign, which we haven't really seen in a long time. It's David Anderson, more or less running uncontested. There were a couple election cycles ago, Patrice Griffin was running a very exciting and viable campaign for mayor, but they got knocked out of the race on a technicality, which is something that tends to happen around here sometimes. Um, so I will talk a little bit about some of the candidates. Although just full disclosure, I only got a chance to interview Chris Glasser, so everything else is based on the publicly available forums and Q&As that they've given to outlets like Now Kalamazoo, MLive, League of Women Voters, so on and so forth. So with that, we're going to talk about that, but also, something that we always try to highlight, and this has been a big theme on the show since we first started in 2016, money in politics. Where is their money coming from? That is oftentimes more instructive than what they are actually saying on the DIS, the DS, the however you want to put it. But I did want to talk a little bit about, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Chris Glasser because we did a full interview with him. Again, you can find that on your own in there show notes. But I did want to spend some time talking about a little bit about some things that stood out to me from a candidate forum that was hosted by our friends at Now Kalamazoo, which again I will link to in the show notes. Um, and they asked some interesting questions that I wouldn't have even thought to ask. And then, of course, some really critical questions that I think every outlet's been asking about things like housing, One question I thought was interesting from that forum, they were talking about literacy and literacy rates. Literacy rates are have been particularly poor nationwide. I think it's something like 13% of adults are illiterate, and they the candidates, some of the candidates had some interesting answers on it. Uh, Jacqueline Slaby gave a very compelling answer on the literacy question. She really leaned into some on the ground experience that they've had, particularly working in the Edison neighborhood. And I think, again, they gave a really compelling answer about how to actually do that on the ground. A lot of them name checked a very important local organization that does a lot of work in trying to increase those literacy rates. That is Read and Write Kalamazoo, which are really out there doing the Lord's work, as I said. Um, and Also, of course, they some references to the Literacy Council. Um, and Yeah, again, you can read some of those responses for yourself. I thought Slobby was probably the one who gave the most compelling answer to that question. Um, Further down, they were asking about small business and how to help small businesses increase the amount of like independent owned businesses, kind of juxtaposing it against big business operations. Kind of some big companies that were name checked. Talk about Plaza Corp, Pfizer, Upjohn. To my mind, I could think of course, Graphic Packaging. Um, One answer that I thought particularly stood out was from Stephanie Hoffman, who's again running for re-election, and she actually tied it right back into issues of gentrification, and that this is something that most of the other candidates didn't touch on. And what another interesting thing is a side out. Six of these candidates are all trumping themselves being small business owners. So that's something that's like there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but in Marxist terms, we call that strata like potentially like petty bourgeois. It kind of depends on like how much money they have and whether they're investing it directly into their neighborhood. But it did strike me that I don't think there's any like real. There are a couple like working class worker candidates, but yeah, it's interesting to me that almost everybody who's running, uh, kind of like I'm a small business owner. Yeah, yeah. But as I said, Stephanie Hoffman made a direct connection between the importance of independent neighborhood owned businesses and gentrification. And what she said specifically is like our small businesses will not have an opportunity to even get a chance to build a business within our core neighborhoods if we as a city don't begin to address gentrification. And she goes on to talk about um, uh, is how sorry um, and she kind of emphasized the idea of using kind of the bully pulpit and city resources to find investors who actually want to go into the core neighborhoods and look at what the neighbors are saying, what the neighborhoods actually want. So I got an interesting answer on that front. Again, you can find everybody's answer to that question um, at the forum page we will link to in the show notes. Um, One thing I did find interesting, and I'm not going to beat up on David Anderson too much, but whether it is a result of just being in office too long or lacking, kind of ambitious, creative ideas, his answer to the first three questions, and this has come up before too, is reminding everybody like the city actually can't do anything about it. The city does not, it's not responsible for that. The city doesn't doesn't do that. Um, and I do want to point out there are cities around the country that Kalamazoo could look at as a model that have been a little bit more proactive in addressing issues and have been a little bit more vigilant in put in stake. One of the things that Drew Drunken brought up was the development of housing trust. This is actually something that we've talked about on the show, and is a successful model that has been seen in places like Jackson, Mississippi, which has a very big kind of leftist grassroots base, which is the idea of finding empty housing and putting it in a public trust that would then be turned around and given back to the community. That's the part and parcel. That's how housing first really should work, and talking about like rehabilitation programs for houses in various states of disrepair. And he talks about taking houses that need rehabilitation, find a family that typically could not go and purchase a home, and then put them in there and work with them with wraparound services to get them to become homeowners. And again, this is the kind of thinking that I think is really important when you are trying to address housing at the municipal level, because a lot of the capitalist market forces that we talk about on our show, the things that cause rents to go up, the things that you know these real estate companies that hoard housing stock, um, and this is what causes homes to be astronomically expensive. This is what is causing the rents to go higher. If you had housing stock that was uh, owned by the community, that inhibits that sort of price gouging from taking place. I know that might sound kooky and socialist, and it is. Well, it's socialist, not kooky. Should be common sense. But I digress. So again, everybody had their own answers on the housing issue. Um, they also talked about gun violence. Stephanie Hoffman had an interesting answer where they linked it directly back into affordable housing, which I think really gets back to something we talk a lot about on the show, is that the real root of crime is it is not because there are, 80s movie villains that just run around causing chaos. It's because again, crime increases when there is desperation, when there's not resources put into the community, when we do not give enough attention and resources to our young people is another aspect of that. So really the only candidate I saw that looped it back into the economic question, Chris Glasser, who did so when we interviewed them, but they made a very odd argument, I thought, which was kind of linking gun violence to government transparency, which I understand, government transparency is very important, of course, but I don't think that really addresses kind of the root issues that create gun violence. Um, so with that, that was just some of my thoughts, looking at again these interviews and the forums that took place. I'm just going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we're going to break down some of the money, and we're going to break down some of the endorsements. Keep your dial locked. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Electropop Therapy, or no, Media Cipher. Sorry, that's my music show. That'll be on it too. Although I do recommend you to hang out for that. I'm going to do a special Halloween episode, so again, it's maybe some sugar to help the medicine go down. Politics are pretty morbid these days. It's much like a much like an Edgar Allan Poe novel or something. We're all living through the Mask of the Red Death. It's more or less. Anyway, I wanted to talk more about, again, the local elections going on. And one thing I'll always try to, we always loop it back to, money talks and BS walks. So, who's getting money from whom, that sort of thing. And for the most part, a lot of the candidates running are mostly just getting small dollar donations. I did see a couple of them get um, uh, some money from the Realtors PAC, or the Political Action Committee, um, and the Greater Kalamazoo Realtors Association. So that's Drew Duncan, and I believe, yeah, actually Drew Duncan, and though Jacqueline Slabby also got an endorsement from them, um, which again, it does kind of perk my eyes up again. I have, um, as far as like realty with a capital R is all about, hoarding capital in the form of housing. There are also I do know individual realtors who have kind of, more progressive politics who operate here in Kalamazoo. So it's hard to necessarily divine, something more sinister from that, when, again, a lot of it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Is the individual realtors in Kalamazoo are more progressive, or are they realtors trying to push an agenda? I think it's more the former than the latter, but my audience, you can kind of, again, look into it for yourself, and do your research, not in the goofy, I watched a video on YouTube way, but like actual research. See what they say, see what their record is, that sort of thing. um to report, Jacqueline Slabby, Stephanie Hoffman, and David Anderson, as of our broadcast day, did not have their campaign finance data live. It's, turning their homework in late, which is unfortunate. We don't get to see where their money's coming from, but hopefully that will be up soon after the election. Um, there wasn't anything particularly audacious in the cycle. I should really mention. Um, Most of the candidates were accruing donations, small private donations, with average of $28.68. No, I don't know what the average is, of course. Drew Duncan probably got the most amount of small dollar donations. He was able to raise the most money from private individuals, and several figures, and I won't name names, but you can look this up for yourself. It's available publicly available on the Kalamazoo County website. You go to their elections page, you can find campaign finance records. But Drew Duncan was mostly all smaller donations. I saw a lot of those from people who are really kind of part of Kalamazoo's social justice culture, people I've known for many years doing the work that I do. If that is kind of an endorsement for you, that makes sense. And then also, a kind of substantial donation to Tammy Ray, who is on the county commission. Actually donated to a couple of different politicians this cycle. But they're also somebody that I have worked with, and they ended up having a much more successful run actually getting into public office than I did. They're not nearly as radical, for one thing. That might help. So, yeah, bandying about and saying a loud voice, "Yo, I'm a Marxist," probably doesn't help. Um, but yeah. But anyway, yeah, Drew got a substantial number of donations, probably the most independent donations of this election cycle. As far as I could tell, maybe Jacqueline Flabby or Stephanie Hoffman did. We do not have their records to look at, but of the records that were available as of today or last night when I did my research, that honor goes to Drew Duncan. Sarah Schlack and Bernard Dervan III, they spent under the reporting waiver, so we can't really give you those numbers. Um, Chris Glasser, mostly small dollar donations. Mostly it looks like stuff from maybe his own family. He did get some money from Tammy Ray. Keisha Dickinson, there were donations from some prominent Kalamazoo politicians. Sean McCann, who's been in the state legislature. Don Cooney, who is the outgoing kind of progressive stalwart of the city commission. And again, Tammy Ray. So again, we will link to it in our show notes. But if you want to see those numbers for yourself, you can go to the county website. They have a campaign finance page, and you can track everybody's information yourself. Don't take my word for it. Um, oh, also David Anderson did not turn in his homework on time. But if we go back to the 2023 election cycle, we do see some interesting donations. He got a $1,225 donation from a Realtors Political Action Committee and Southwest Michigan First, which is America's America. Kalamazoo's kind of big business chamber of commerce type organization gave him $1,000. That is the organization that helped come up with the Foundation for Excellence. They really represent the billionaire status quo in Kalamazoo, and they gave David Anderson $1,000 to remain on as mayor. So interpret that how you will. And then, of course, I did want to talk. Endorsements can be a really big can be very important. And when we're talking about the candidates and who they're running, who's backing them, Drew Duncan has a large swath of endorsements from both local politicians, people currently running organizations. She Drew Duncan was endorsed by We the People of Kalamazoo, who it's an organization that I have worked with this year. We're working on passing some ballot initiatives to strengthen the rights of tenants to organize, and generally having our eye set on helping to organize tenants unions in the city. I got endorsement from them. He's also been endorsed by Don Cooney, Stephanie Hoffman, Alonzo Wilson currently on the city commission, Jen Strebs, from the Kalamazoo County Commission, as well as Tammy Ray and Montes Morales. That's three county commissioners. Montes Morales represents a big chunk of our listening audience, including parts of Vine and the Edison neighborhood. Some other folks: Keith Platt, Maddie Jordan Woods, Tony Scott, Brian Fields. Our Revolution, which was an offshoot of the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign, trying to find and field progressive candidates. Also, the Greater Kalamazoo Association of Realtors, which again, that's the only thing that kind of makes me raise my eyebrow. But other than that, pretty impressive slate of endorsements. Jacqueline Slobby, who I will note, I would really encourage folks read or watch these forums for yourselves. But Jacqueline Slobby is probably the best at really getting into the weeds, not only policies but also kind of the community organization biosphere that exists in Kalamazoo. She seems to really understand things going at the ground level in a very intuitive way, whereas I saw some of the other candidates give more generic answers. But she was endorsed by Don Cooney, Kiana Decker, Alonzo Wilson, all city commissioners, John Taylor over at the county commission, Mark Schauer used to be a local representative here. Also, the Greater Kalamazoo Association of Realtors. So, yeah, that's I guess. So, um, Keisha Dickinson, Dickinson, was endorsed by the Progressive Democratic Caucus of Women of Muskegon County. Eric Cunningham, who used to be on the city commission, Sean McCann, again, has been a state rep for us in this area. Thomas Whitner, who is the current county treasurer. Jason Wiersma, the drain commissioner, and Montes Morales, who is again county commissioner, representing parts of the Vine neighborhood and Edison. Chris Glasser, who we actually did get a chance to interview for mayor, was endorsed by the Progressive Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. David Anderson is endorsed by the Greater Kalamazoo Association of Realtors. Although I should mention, it's very interesting. David's campaign page is pretty bare bones. It was there wasn't any activity on it until September 13th. It was very minimal after. That was like the only endorsement post I could find on there for this election cycle. I couldn't find any endorsement information for the other candidates, including Bernard Durvan III or The only thing that really popped up looking up looking them up on social media. Bernard Durvan the third is I don't know if he's a registered Republican, but he did go to speak at the Kalamazoo GOP office. So however your politics. I believe he's a Republican, but I'm not 100% on that. Um, a lot of his rhetoric is not too Trumpian. I will give him that credit. It does seem very like um, again, kind of more conservative blue collar stuff. Um, for my opinion, I would vote for other people, but I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or how to vote. But I know I probably wouldn't. Um, but I that is not to say necessarily that they're a terrible candidate. I think there's just better folks running, and also like yeah, some conversations need to be had about you know all of these candidates I've mentioned. Except I believe Chris Glasser's running as an independent, but they are still tied to the Democratic Party, which we have issues with on the show. We talk about, and but uh, again, at the municipal level, it's really probably the most important metric is where does their money come from? What is their platform? And again, who supports slash endorses them. That is the way that I usually make my decisions when it comes to these municipal elections. I would encourage folks to do the same. And again, we will link to that information in our show notes. One other really important thing for working class Kalamazoo residents to keep in mind that also on the ballot, in addition to all the city commission and mayoral candidates running, that is going to be um, the millage to continue financial support for the Central County Transportation Authority, or our Metro bus system. The millage renewal is really important because for many of my listeners and many working class folks in Kalamazoo, that is how they get around. And something we've been kind of wanting for years is like more service. They did expand service to Sunday, which is great, but it's still limited. And as the city continues to grow, we really need better public transportation. So that is on the ballot. If you're a bus rider or you care about public transportation in Kalamazoo, make sure you go out. Make sure you go out and vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Keep it locked. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online Media Cyphers on YouTube, Facebook, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to God, I keep messing up. I host two shows. My music show is on later. So it's kind of a weird mix of interests I have. It's just like, okay, I'm going to interpret local news through a Marxist lens. And then after that, I'm going to play a bunch of synth pop and new wave. It's just yeah, I contain multitudes, I guess. Anyway, sorry, that was a distraction. Um, I want to do a quick hit because I don't think we've talked about this, or we didn't talk about this on last week's episode, but wanted much love to Khalid Jamal, who returned Sunday. I think it was October. Was it Sunday, October 19th? Returned home to Kalamazoo. Scores of people were there to meet him at the Kalamazoo airport. You don't know who Khalid Jamal is. We reported on him earlier in the year. Our friends at Now Kalamazoo did a really wonderful interview with him a few months ago. But he joined the flotilla to try to bring aid to the people of Gaza who were, been under like a 2-year siege from the Israeli government. They were intercepted, although again, they got much closer to Gaza than the flotilla ever has historically. And of course, it blew up in Israel's face. They decided they were going to be particularly brutal to the flotilla participants. I think everybody by now has heard about the abuse that they inflicted upon Greta Thunberg. We don't know exactly what might have happened to Khalid, but they all described, terrible conditions, bed bugs, being kind of forced to stay awake, minimal food and water, being verbally harassed by the Israeli guards, being called a terrorist by Ben Gavir, who again is like a very far right. Um, what what is his title? I'm sorry, I'm having uh, a brain fart. But Ben Gavir is no, yeah, Minister of National Security. I knew it was something to do with like national defense or whatever. But again, as I mentioned, our dear our guy, our Kalamazoo's own Khalid Jamal finally returned home after some time in custody, and again putting himself on the line to try to deliver food to the starving people of Gaza, which I think I really have to underscore. There are some people online kind of calling these it's performative because they're not going to they get delivered. It's like, well, what it does, it highlights the brutality of the Israeli regime. It and also these activists who participated in the flotilla, including Khalid, really were putting their lives on the line. Israel was threatening to kill them if they were calling them Hamas, which usually is what Israel says when they want to justify bombing somebody. And also, as was reported, the flotilla had this very positive side effect. It allowed a lot of fishermen in Gaza to actually collect fish. And, there's no knowing how many lives were extended or saved by being able to do that. Which, yeah, by the way, if you don't know that, Israel does not allow people in Gaza to fish, to go into the sea and by a threat of gunpoint. It's that dire and gross. And the flotilla distracted the IDF Navy long enough for them to actually go and get some fish and feed their families. So Khalid was part of that, and he undoubtedly saved some lives through his actions. So he is a local hero. I'm glad that he's home safe. Let's give some time to relax with family. I will link to a story about that in the show notes, of course. Um, with that, I wanted to pivot to a nationwide story that is, again, it's kind of intersecting with the disinvestment and disaster relief from the federal government and how it is playing out in Michigan's backyard. This is a story from Bridge, Michigan. It's written by Jordan Hermani. Feds deny Michigan request for homeowner aid following ice storm. The federal government has rejected Michigan's appeal for additional disaster aid following a historic ice storm in March that caused widespread damage and power outages across northern parts of the state. In a letter sent this week and released Friday, the Federal Emergency Management Agency informed Governor Gretchen Whitmer that a request for funding to help residents with housing and disaster-related losses was unwarranted, as was a request for funding to repair damaged utilities. Whitmer had initially requested the aid in late July, which was denied. She filed an appeal to that denial in August. In July, President Donald Trump announced he was approving $50 million in assistance for storm recovery efforts, but the federal disaster aid approval was limited. FEMA approved assistance to state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and certain private, nonprofit organizations. This week's denial means Michigan residents who saw ice-covered trees fall in their homes cannot directly apply for federal aid. Whitmer previously noted that at least one cooperative utility, that Prescott Isle Electric and Gas, which has about 35,000 customers, suffered an estimated $150 million in damages due to the storm and would potentially raise prices on members or customers in order to recoup the losses. While FEMA denied, and I'm skipping down a little bit, while FEMA denied the state funding for personal home and utility repairs, it is still reviewing Michigan's request for grant funding for long-term projects to reduce future risk associated with natural disasters. The storm, which hit Michigan between March 28th and March 30th, encased a broad swath of the northern lower peninsula and southern tip of the upper peninsula in inches of ice, knocking down millions of trees, damaging homes and businesses, and devastating electrical infrastructure. Many residents in the largely rural area spent days to weeks without power. So I want to really emphasize this is the intersection of austerity and climate change. When we have a government that is determined to strip funding from all of like the kind of social safety net services that we need, especially in dire circumstances right after these big disasters, this is what happens. People are left with shattered homes, shattered lives, and no resources to pick up the pieces. And of course, this is from it is a from a government that has followed austerity to the sociopathic degree. It's like who need they from the Trump administration and the billionaires that back them, who needs a social safety net? The billionaires are doing just fine. The millionaires are okay. Why is the government wasting money on helping these poor people recover? This is the way that these people think. And it's also the way these people think about their own supporters, because it is worth pointing out, and some people have pointing out, the areas of Michigan that were most severely impacted by this ice storm back in March tended to be the areas that voted in the largest numbers for President Donald Trump. And this isn't a moment to try to rub it in or say this is what you get. This is a moment to point out that, as many of us tried to warn these people, Donald Trump does not care about you. He is a billionaire. He looks out for himself. He looks out for people in his class, really himself more than his class, though. That's why there's so much capitalist infighting, is because Trump is very self-centered, to the point where, again, he's looking out how to enrich himself over trying to maintain capitalist hegemony, doing things that actually damage the ability of American capitalists to maintain a tranquil equilibrium, because it's in his financial interest to cause chaos. But I kind of went on a sidebar there. But what I really wanted to emphasize is, like, look, Donald Trump is not some sort of exceptional politician who is going to stick it to the man, whoever you think the man is. He is going to look out for his bottom line, and he is going to leave his financially struggling supporters at the wayside. He showed that here. He has showed this in other parts of the country too, where he got a lot of support. Again, the whole thing going on with the farmers right now, where he is encouraging people to buy Argentinian beef. And again, a lot of those rural red state farmers who voted for him are feeling betrayed, rightfully so. And if you're, living in that northern part of Michigan, which is maybe, quote unquote Trump country, I hope you're asking a lot of hard questions about how much this government actually cares about you. And spoiler alert, and I've done a lot of research to figure this out, the answer is it does not. It does not care about you. And if you don't believe me, look at your broken home and see what the federal government's response to it was. All right. Well, we're going to take just another quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Okay, so this next one, this is a wild story, and I wanted to comment on it because I think it's a really big encapsulation of kind of where we are as a country right now. And we're going to file this under Nazi nonsense. But this was published in MLive, and as written by Matthew Miller. Headline is A Michigan elected official is married to a neo-Nazi. Some constituents have a problem with that. Yeah, you think so. It's published on October 27th. I'll give you the details. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I think it's important for you to understand the context, and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Um, Megan Booth says she didn't know she was married to a neo-Nazi influencer. Not exactly. uh, I didn't know. I swear. Like, man, ma'am, I'm sorry. I just like, how would you not know that? It's like, are you not paying? Because this is something that again they use a lot. Like, I just didn't know. I didn't like. You hear this a lot from like when there's a mass shooter or something. It's like I had no idea. You look at stuff it's like, how much attention were you paying to them? Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sidebarred that quickly. I've got to tell y'all what this story is about. So, did she realize her husband Chris had become more extreme in his views in the last few months? She did. Had she watched the videos he began posting online in May, the ones where he said America was built by and for white people, and talked about Nazis in the 1930s breaking the chains of Jewish tyranny in Germany? Not before they became an issue, she said. I'm kind of curious at what point it became an issue. Oh, yeah, it became an issue when people found out about it and it became a public. Oh, God. Um, mm. So she goes on to say there were signs, said Booth, a Republican who was elected treasurer of Maple Valley Township in Montcalm County last year. I'm not going to say there weren't, but had he declared himself a national socialist to me? No, it's not something that we discuss at the dinner table. It also like this goes to and this is some interpersonal phenomenon I can't quite understand. And this is again a way a lot of Americans have bring up. It's like don't bring up politics at the dinner table. And this gets to such an extreme that you don't even know what your own like intimate romantic partner stands for. You see this dynamic not as much these days, but definitely used to where you would have like some a liberal kind of romantically intertwined with somebody who's more conservative. Not to throw shade, I know my sister is kind of in this dynamic, but like this is just thrown to a cartoonish extreme. It again, when your husband is making neo-Nazi content on YouTube, how is it not something you observe? And again, how is it something that is not a deal breaker? Um, anyway, she learned the extent of her husband's National Socialist proclivities, Nazi proclivities, when a reporter for the British newspaper The Guardian contacted her over the summer about a story that would identify him as the creator of the YouTube channel called Shameless Spurg, which features videos with titles like Why I Hate Jews and Black Crime Matters. The rest of the community learned about them after the story published in August. The question is still splitting the community is whether Booth has provided adequate assurances that she will do her job without prejudice and it's time to move on, whether the township needs a more potent reckoning with what it means to have a neo Nazi in their midst. I saw this happening and I did not want Nazis to become normal, where we just go, oh, yeah, they just have a difference of opinion, said Tricia Wells, who chairs the township's planning commission and is part of a group that is now planning a recall effort against Booth, which, to my mind, that's the correct response. It is, and the thing is, that is essentially what Meg Booth is saying in regards to her husband. She's calling it like a difference of opinions. She said, people are dying over hurt feelings. We've forgotten how to have constructive conversations across divides. And this is kind of also talking a little bit about Charlie Kirk's assassination. She went on to say, um, that she didn't support her husband's racism or anti-Semitism, but she said she respects her husband's right to free speech. And went on to say, to suggest that I must divorce my husband or for political or social views is not only unreasonable, it's insulting to the many couples who have different perspectives, yet remain committed to each other. See, why I wanted to point out the story, we are at a point in history where Nazi nonsense has been normalized to the extent that somebody, a sitting elected official, could say this with a straight face. It is not. It is not a difference of opinion. We made a collective decision as a society long ago that Nazism is not a respectable opinion. Yes, there is a First Amendment. People can say what they want, but that does not, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. Ms. Booth describes herself as like kind of a more a libertarian who does not go along with the idea that Jews are going to replace us or there's something inherently criminal in existing as a black person. But the idea that you could even think about staying married to somebody who's a Nazi, this would be like just incomprehensible to us as a body politic, even like 10 years ago. But this stuff has been normalized to such a point that she feels comfortable saying this out loud. And, like, I think a lot of people are going to say, like, well, does she really, is she really apart from her opinion so much as she claims to be? I mean, like, there's this old German saying, if you are in a room, uh, uh, if you're in a room with one like decorated Nazi soldier and like a room with 20 other people who aren't speaking up, you're in a room with 20 Nazis. And that's effectively true. Like she's essentially condoning this behavior by saying that it's acceptable and that she's going to stick with her husband, even though she's not telling her husband, like, stop being a Nazi. She's just going to stay with him. Let bygones be. Everybody's different. Everybody, you don't have to respect Nazi opinions. You shouldn't. You're not. You're not. And the the fact that this is even being spoken about is ridiculous. And hats off to people doing a recall effort because this needs to be a line in the sand. You cannot have Nazi Nazi stuff does not exist in the public discourse. We go back to the paradox of tolerance. If you tolerate intolerance, intolerance will exploit that to push its message out. You cannot tolerate that. And this is not to say that you should like go out and be violent as by the way, as her husband is doing. He is doubled down and is basically going online and threatening everybody who is pointing out Chris Booth is threatening me. He's threatening everybody. He's stuffed with his Nazi nonsense. He's doubling down. He's not backing down from his Nazi nonsense, and he's threatening people who are speaking out against it. Um, However, I should say, like, there was a time not long ago where this stuff was completely intolerable. You should be a pariah in your community, Mr. and Mrs. Booth, for both spreading Nazi nonsense around and for tolerating it. Yeah, I'm sorry. The correct and moral response, Miss Booth, to finding out your husband is a neo-Nazi is to divorce them, throw that entire marriage in the trash can, go run away. And yeah, people if you're saying I can't believe people are telling me to divorce my husband, that is the correct and moral thing to do if your husband's a neo-Nazi and he's not going to stop being a neo-Nazi. The fact that this is even up for debate is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. It's like, throw that entire marriage in the garbage can. And yeah, a recall effort for her. And you might I don't like I guess there is a line of argument that like, well, it's not her opinion. So it's like, well, she's condoning it by staying with her husband and by not coming out more strongly against it. Again, the husband is threatening people on the internet for speaking up about it. What a ridiculous man. What sorry. Oh, by the way, one thing that really infuriates me is like I was diagnosed as the on the autism spectrum, but she tries to defend it. It's like, oh, he has Asperger's. He has, by the way, is that's an outmoded term that was actually uh, developed by a Nazi doctor who tortured autistic people. But he's doing the Elon Musk thing, trying to say like, oh, she, don't, maybe a neo-Nazi, but it's because he's autistic. It's like being autistic does not make you a Nazi. Like I I'm just hyper focused on being racist. You could have hyper focused on trains or, for example, Marxism. But no, no, no. Yeah, so just a lot of layers of ridiculousness to this onion. And, if you want to take everything this woman is saying at face value, which we should, at least I should, because this is a public program. I'm going to say this. This is neutrality bias run amok. And we talk about false neutrality bias is a concept we talk about on our show quite often, where something you will see the mainstream media do quite often is they will have two people with opposing views and they will treat those views with equal seriousness and equal time, even if one is absolutely objectively incorrect and ridiculous and the other is correct and credible. You see this most often with the climate change debate. You have, like, again, it makes it seem like there's like a half and half split between climate deniers and people who recognize science of climate change. And obviously it's only like a fringe 1.5% of scientists who even entertain the notion that climate change is not real. But this is like seeing like everybody has an opinion, everybody's opinion has to be respected, taken to this ridiculous cartoonish degree. Nazi opinions don't matter. Nazi opinions should not be entertained. And to hear this woman saying it is like it is taking that false neutrality concept to its most ridiculous endpoint that everybody should be allowed a platform, even when they are, say, and by the way, we had a war about this back in the 40s. I don't know if y'all remember. And again, I could point out, America is not so innocent. And when Chris Booth mentioned, how America is a white man's country, he's not really too far off from what the founding fathers had in mind. I mean, they literally enslaved people. Um, and of course, a lot of the Nazis' ideas came from, looking at America's homework. So I'm not going to be out here like some liberal saying like this is not who we are. Well, yeah, it's this has been a lot of who we are. That's right. But the point should not be comparing it to how America started or what it, because again, a lot of white supremacy is baked in to the United States, as again a way it is intertwined with capitalism. It is intertwined with the ruling class. White supremacy has been used uh, to prop up capitalism, to divide the working class over the years. And it is the responsibility of this working class to see through white supremacist snake oil and unite against the ruling class that would seek to divide us. From the very beginning, when the threat of working class unity reared its head, white supremacy was there to give poor whites jobs as slave catchers, or to kind of promote Irish immigrants into whiteness to prevent them from unionizing with their fellow black workers. Chris Booth is a fool. Um, and hopefully maybe he will see the light. I don't know if he's as autistic as his wife claims. Maybe put some books of Marxism in front of him and maybe he'll figure some stuff out. But his his wife is obviously the bigger fool in this situation, because you can't both sidesism this stuff away. And I'm sorry, you have to have some kind of a moral backbone. You can't take a both sides approach to this, especially in the year 2025 when we have white nationalists in charge of the White House's social media account, where you have Elon Musk doing Nazi salutes. Yeah, I'm sorry, you got to pick a side. And the people of Maple Grove Township, to their credit, are demanding that she does. And this idea that she could just kind of bury it down in the rhetoric of the false neutrality bias is again pretty ridiculous. So, yeah, I'm sorry. If Miss Booth wants to keep her job, she needs to disavow Nazism and throw that entire man in the trash. If she wants to stay where she's at, then she deserves to get recalled. And good on for the people of Maple Grove for doing it. And you know, um, Chris Booth trying to threaten people. I guess he can keep being a paper tiger on the internet, but he might get himself in some trouble for doing that, either legally or maybe threatening the wrong person, as can sometimes happen. Anyway, you can find that article in live. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Wider F or YouTube, Facebook, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Well, I want to spend some time talking about an issue that is going to just be an extra large burden on the working class going into especially November, the holiday season. It's um if you haven't heard of the food stamp apocalypse, which uh, because of the government, well, essentially because of the government shutdown, I'm going to go in a little bit about the scare quotes because of the government shutdown. EBT SNAP benefits are not going to happen in November. That's not necessarily true for every state, but a lot of them are having to pull emergency funding. Michigan, unfortunately, is not one of those states. And this has never happened before. Previous government shutdowns, there have been, they've convened long enough to, extend that funding, get that through. And I need people to understand this is a very deliberate choice from the administration and the Republicans currently in charge. Mr. Mike Johnson comes to mind. Um, Now, what we have seen, the Democrats are demanding that Medicaid gets preserved. That there's some assurances that they are going to extend health care and repeal some of those really dire Medicaid cuts that passed in the big BS bill. To their credit, that's a noble thing to do, and I'm it's good that the corporate Democrats have finally developed a spine. Again, some out of like they're not monsters. They want to see people actually get healthcare, but also that's better for the system. That kind the healthcare, the Medicaid the apocalypse that is set to take effect in December of 2026 is going to be so destabilizing to American capitalism. I think people really do not understand the implications, as is this food stamp apocalypse, because as as this goes on, we are going to see the downstream effects of it throughout the entire economy. When nobody has EBT, that is going to, especially at big box stores like Walmart, Meyer, which really depend on money from food stamps. It's a form of federal subsidy. Uh, Companies like Walmart pay their workers low wages. A lot of them, even in the break room, show you how to sign up for EBT. Their low wages, the low wages Walmart pays to its workers, is subsidized by the federal government through SNAP. By withholding food benefits, you're going to see hiring freezes. You are going to see firings. You're going to see layoffs at those places. You are going to see food prices across the board go up. So even if you are like some nasty person who is getting some sort of demented glee that people are going to go hungry, well, your grocery bills are going to increase too, buddy. So if you can't look out for other people, maybe at least look out for yourself. These are going to have devastating downstream effects on every working class person in this country. And of course, at the same time, Donald Trump is building a ballroom. This is really like this is America's let them eat cake moment. It's just so ridiculous. You're going to let people starve in the month of November. Thanksgiving is coming up, which again we can unpack the colonial nature of Thanksgiving, but it is at least it's a day most working class people get off to hang out with their family and eat food. Well, you hang out with your family, but maybe you'll have to eat a lot of spam and ramen instead. And grappling with this story on a personal level, I like the scale of how bad this is going to get. It just boggles my mind. I can't, I have a hard time even really processing it. And this is also, I think, another example of the imperial boomerang. We saw the American government for 2 years condone Israel using food as a weapon of war. We saw them starve the population of Gaza, particularly this year, but throughout the 2 years. And it's not a stretch to understand, an American federal government that views many of its own citizens as the enemy would not be averse to using this as a weapon of the culture wars as well. And of course, that's the narrative that they're based. Like all the welfare queen stuff is ratcheting up, or the rhetoric about people selling their food stamps to buy drugs. And the funny thing about it is like most EBT and SNAP benefits go to red states. This is another example of like the farmers or the Trump voters up in northern Michigan. The administration does not care about you. And in any situation where they can put money on their pockets, they can destabilize things, create chaos, so that again, certain people, so their friends can make more money. They are going to do it. And of course, there's also the dimension to it. Mike Johnson is holding off on reopening the government because there was a Democratic representative elected in Arizona. They need to get sworn in. Once they're sworn in, Congress will have the necessary number of votes to release the Epstein files or start that process. And a lot of people who pay attention to stuff are saying like, oh, that's what a coincidence. There's also a lot of people who are gaming this out. Is the government ever going to reopen? I don't want to be alarmist about that and go into the weeds, although that maybe 2 or 3 months from now, if we're still staring at the same situation, I could talk about the implications of that. But for right now, we have a government that is holding food stamps hostage so that we don't, so that rich pedophiles don't get told on. I need you to process that. People are going to starve during one of the biggest like holiday food centered events of the year so that the government can protect pedophiles. Let them eat cake. I'll just leave it at that. I think people have overthrown their governments for less, but you know. um So I did with that. I did want to hit on a story from Michigan Advance, which kind of parcels out a little bit more how this is going to affect, especially some vulnerable populations in Michigan. And this extends beyond talking simply about the government shutdown, but long-term issues with work requirements and how that is going to hinder food access to many Michigan residents. This is written by Kevin Hardy, published on October 21st. Veterans, rural residents, and older adults may lose food stamps due to Trump work requirements. States are rushing to inform some residents who rely on food stamps that they will soon be forced to meet work requirements or lose their food assistance. Recent federal legislation ended exemptions to work requirements for older adults, homeless people, veterans, and some rural residents, among others. A rapid timeline to put the changes into effect has sparked chaos in state agencies that must cut off access if residents don't meet certain work, education, or volunteer reporting requirements. States are implementing the permanent changes to the SNAP program amid the uncertainty of the federal government shutdown. The budget impasse could result in millions of Americans not getting their SNAP benefits next month if money runs out. But even before the shutdown, states were assessing the new work rules for food stamps, the first in a wave of cutbacks to the nation's largest food assistance program required under President Donald Trump's major tax and spending law enacted in July. States are currently confronting the end of exceptions to work requirements for older adults, homeless people, veterans, and those recently living in foster care. Those could threaten benefits even for people who are working but who may struggle with the paperwork to prove they're meeting the requirements, advocates say. Under the new law, states also have lost funding for nutrition education programs and must end eligibility for non citizens such as refugees and asylees, and will lose work requirement waivers for those living in areas with limited employment opportunities. So I want to break down kind of the problems with it. So again, it gives another layer of paperwork to, especially older residents who have a hard time going through these. And like a paperwork era could set people back weeks or months for getting access to the resources that they need. As somebody who has been going through this process, I've helped people through this process. I've helped my own brother through this process, through getting Social Security benefits. It is a labyrinthine process that even with adequate, or I guess I should say, the staffing we had under the Biden administration could take 8 to 12 months, especially if you have a paperwork slip up. Keep in mind, at the same time, they have been disinvesting from these agencies and cutting staffing levels. Less staff with more bureaucracy and more paperwork and an absolute, like a new layer of bureaucracy, work requirements to people who are going to have issues with meeting those requirements. Older people, a lot of them can't work or volunteer at the capacity that these programs call for. Same, employment is precarious in rural areas. There are not a lot of jobs around. And again, a lot of these rural areas and red areas that voted for Trump are going to be the first to be impacted by this administration's absolute lack of empathy and pursuit of austerity at all cost, including the lives of some of their own voters and supporters. Also, again, I think, people living in foster care, this is something that hits close to home to me, something I've been concerned about. I work in adult foster care, and some of these individuals who could not, survive on their own are going to lose access to food, which is going to put more pressure on the companies that help take care of these individuals, like even the company that I work for. And it's worth pointing out again, this is very intentional. Increasing the bureaucracy and paperwork around getting these benefits, tightening who has access to these benefits, and making the paperwork to do them more complex. This is a natural deterrent to try to deter people from trying to access these benefits. It is deliberately trying to gatekeep and increase desperation in the American population so that they become more dependent on corporations. And honestly, part of the Trump administration's MO and part of what has made them look so ridiculous in these last few months is trying to paint a picture of chaos in urban America when one does not exist. When you see, stormtrooper thugs facing off against people in frog costumes. The problem is there has not been the type of uprising disruption that the Trump administration wants. Now, how do you make a population desperate? How do you make it more violent? How do you increase the crime rate? Well, one of the better ways to do it would be restricting people's access to food, because as we've talked a lot on the program, the crime rate is tied probably most closely to the economics of an area and the level of desperation those residents face. When you take away what averages of between $250 to $300 worth of food a month away from people, you are going to see desperate people. And even if you don't get a let them eat cake moment, you are going to see a lot of chaos and disruption. And I think, again, the thing that I draw back to, though, is this is not necessarily going to be just in the urban areas. Again, most SNAP benefits go to rural areas and a lot of quote unquote red areas that vote for Trump. Are we going to see a real reckoning among his base when that spigot gets turned off? That remains to be seen. But of course, that's why Donald Trump is investing billions in arming and equipping ICE, which is looking more and more like it's going to be his own personal army. And why Pete Hegseth, and they've been talking about training up units of the National Guard to respond to uprisings, because they know that at some point they are going to squeeze the working class so hard that they will have no recourse but to rise up, and they want to be ready to put it down. That's where we're heading with all of this. And again, that's why I advocate, while we still have the resources we do have, we need to organize boycotts and general strikes, because that is a non-violent way to disrupt the capitalist without having state violence inflicted upon us. But again, general strikes and things like that take a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of coordination. Um, and is the American working class there yet? Maybe not, but we have to be ready or not. Here they come, and by they I mean, again, the federal government and the capitalists who back this very bleak agenda. All right, we're gonna take another break, and well, let's see. Actually, you know what? That actually kind of wraps up a lot of the big stories I have to talk about. I did want to point out, some of the more immediate things to get through this month. We need to take care of each other, and I want to point out two organizations here in Kalamazoo who are going to bear the brunt of this again completely invented catastrophe. You should lend your support, whether that's financial or donation or time, to organizations like Feeding Broncos. They're right here on campus. They help provide meals for students, especially those who are struggling economically. And a lot of students do rely on SNAP benefits to supplement their diet. Um, Feeding Broncos is going to need to step up, try to help that organization however you can. Also, I want to give a shout out to Loaves and Fishes. They operate locally. They are a really important food pantry, food bank that provide food for Kalamazoo's needy, and have been for years. And I've got a personal, they helped my parents and my family when we were really struggling, and they are going to have a just a, a catastrophic increase in need over this upcoming month. And whether like volunteer time or financial, or donating food or a food drive, all of that is going to be so important this upcoming month, and potentially in the coming months, as the federal government tries to starve the working class. So again, however you can help those agencies, those organizations, it is going to be super important. We, the working class of Kalamazoo, we need to take care of each other um, in these catastrophic times. I want to thank you for listening. Y'all have been listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Going into the election next week, November 4th, I encourage y'all share. If you found the information we shared helpful, share it with other residents. We do have that full interview with Chris Glasser online. We will link to in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.